So thank you for joining us. This is our sixth episode on this series. KCG Forum simply provide a safe space for Black professionals, and simply we talk about the challenges, or rather, systemic barriers facing Black professionals in industry, and try and come up with some really creative ways of trying to combat systemic racism within industry and community. So I want to welcome you guys and our viewers to our sixth episode, and we're going to be talking about tech this week. So without further ado, I'll just jump into the introductions, and I'll perhaps go to Fatim. You're on my top left side, so I'll start with the top left and go around.
Okay, so I'm Fatim Kand. I'm from Ivory Coast. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I have 8 to 10 years in the field. I'm currently living in Canada, Montreal to be more precisely. And this is gonna be the first time I attend such an event.
It's very good. It's nice to have you.
I start as a cybersecurity consultant with a consulting firm in France. So I worked there for 6 years approximately. Then I moved in Canada and continue in the cybersecurity consulting environment. And I recently joined a startup. So now I'm on the other side. I'm no longer a consultant.
Very good. Nice to meet you, Fatim. Okay, we'll move over to Shen Buddy.
Hi everyone. My name is Shiambadini Mashman, and it's really interesting, Fatim, that you talk about the fact that you've had such a long history in cybersecurity. That's something that in the past 2 or 3 years I've been getting more interested in learning more about. So that's really cool. So nice to meet you. I work as a consultant as well, internal to my organization. First I was doing implementations for a couple of years. Now more of product consulting and automation development. Working at an intelligent automation company that tries to create robotic process automation digital workers that can assist companies with their daily tasks.
Oh, very good. Thanks. And for myself, I am a management consultant. My focus area is simply inclusive leadership, or rather diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, I joined the consulting business back in June of this year. For a good 14 years, I was working as a senior leader at a large corporation here in Canada, and I worked in multiple roles within management. And so I decided to jump ship and join the management consulting field. And where my passion is simply trying to, build my community and providing value for the most part in using all my experience within management. I have had 5 episodes on this series. We've covered HR, aviation, literature, education, and the topics have been very, very, or rather, people have been very passionate about the topics and just the conversation out there. So again, the objective here is simply to find some creative ways, or rather solutions for specific tech solutions, rather specific solutions within the tech industry that you guys may have experience, or rather that we can discuss tonight. So let me just jump into the questions that I sent out for for this episode, and let's try and consider at least one instance where you experienced or observed some type of racial barrier in your profession, or in industry, especially, and I would say preferably in the past, not necessarily in your current role, but in the past, though specific to the tech industry. Um, you want to go first, Shian Buddy?
Sure. When I was thinking about the question, it's really interesting because there are a lot of subtle things that can happen at times. And, I feel like there have been moments in life or in work where I'm not sure if the reaction that I'm getting for something, or the way that I'm being addressed, is racial, or, I'm a woman, so is it sexist? Like, there's so many things to put on top of yourself sometimes. It's just a little exhausting. But one very clear example that I had from a previous workplace was a time that a senior leader made a negative comment about my background as a Nigerian. When, he came into the room, was kind of getting information about everybody, learned I was Nigerian, and then made a poorly, constructed joke about that. And it was unexpected and embarrassing, and it was the first week on that job in that role. So it was a really, interesting type of emotional journey that I went on, from being excited to being in this new role and meeting new people, to then kind of being reminded that I'm seen as other by people around me.
So I'm curious to know, so how did you deal with that? How did you address that?
I've spoken about this in other arenas, but unfortunately, because of power dynamics, perceived or otherwise, often my tendency is to kind of mentally note the person and then kind of distance myself, a little bit of shutting down. So for that instance, I think I was visibly shocked. At times, my friends will tell me that my emotions live on my face. I don't really hide them too well. They just kind of appear. And so I think I just looked shocked and embarrassed. And I think he tried to backpedal, but I just, from that moment, it kind of just was known that, okay, this person is someone that you're not, you'll be reaching out for a lunch and learn or an informational interview with this particular person. And I just kind of moved away and kind of focused on the people in the organization that were more supportive and seemed to value me for the work I was providing and not devalue me, firsthand just because of my background.
I'm curious to know, since you mentioned that you were new at the firm at the time, correct?
Right.
So I'm curious to know, did that perhaps appear to you as a perception, or rather, did that kind of create any perception towards this specific firm in terms of culture? Is this something that you were probably thinking was a culture there, or I'm curious that you actually pinpointed the one person and not the entire um,
Right.
firm. Yes.
Right. Well, the person was a senior leader, so I suppose it would have been easy to say that, the entire organization, held values that I might not have agreed with. I think it was one of those things where it kind of gave me an inkling that, oh, maybe this isn't a place that I will be able to feel entirely comfortable. If this is coming from senior management, who do I report this to if it's the senior management that's saying certain things? And so I think it just kind of, gave me a mental note in the back of my mind. And as things built up that were either related to that or otherwise, you just kind of have a checklist going that lets you know when it's time to move to another organization or not.
Very good. You're doing something that I think most of us do, where someone will come across as um, you know they're cracking a joke, and they actually think it's a joke, and it catches you off guard, and you're thinking in the back of your mind that, okay, that's not appropriate. And what most of us do is just we tuck it in. We just make a mental note, and we keep our distance, and we don't even talk about it. Um, but I would want you to consider that, because and I'm sure you probably now perhaps speak more about it, and are probably vocal about those kind of jokes, because in the moment when we don't really show our um, if we're not able to be vocal about it, we end up being complicit with it. And where someone may think this may come across as a joke, and it's not, um, they're inclined to do it again, and they'll do it to another person, and over again. The other person may decide to take off, and what we find is that people who are not necessarily able to take those kind of jokes are excluded from industries, or rather from firms of opportunity like you were. And I think the more we talk about it, the more people can recognize that it's not okay. That's very interesting, the interaction there. I'm curious to know. So for team, what's your what, any chance you can probably share your story in terms of racial barrier that you faced?
I think about it a lot, but I don't have any specific situation in my mind, it's a bit like Shion Bade, because sometimes it was maybe linked to the fact that I'm just a woman and there's nothing related to the color of my skin. So, but the thing that occurred a lot during my whole experience is basically the lack of opportunities to shine professionally. So it started at the beginning. During my first experience as a cybersecurity consultant, the thing that quite surprised me was that a lot of Black professionals, even with a huge amount of experience, they were never at a leadership role. They were also considered as experienced consultant. So I didn't really see any Black men or Black women at a leadership position. And those were during the first year of my professional experience. Then time passed. I joined the first firm with actually a Black woman at a senior leadership role. So I'm like, oh, great, amazing. Finally, I found the perfect match for me, you see, the perfect company. And few months later, I quite kind of discovered that she might have the title, but the salary is not there yet. Like she's paid under older white folks with a lower level. So those kind of things were my experience. Is it because we are Black? Is it because we are Black and women? I don't know, maybe there's a bit of truth somewhere in the middle. How I deal with that and how this impacts me during my career, well, when I noticed that I didn't have that much opportunities, I decided to study. So I tried to pass a lot of certifications and continue to work, because at the beginning I have an engineering degree. So since I start working, I decided to switch to the professional certifications. So I keep learning. And then I face another barrier, kind of, which were the soft skills. Because now that I have all those technical skills, I need to address the soft skills. And the soft skills are quite, it's the blurry side from my perspective in the Black community, because the way you approach leadership in Africa, or even in the Black community in general, because I'm pretty sure it's the same for the Black people in Europe and here in North America, it's not the same. I feel like there's a different dynamic, and you also need to be able to adapt your leadership style to your firm culture. And to do that, you're gonna need a mentor and a sponsor. And those are two barriers that we lack the most in the Black community. So it's not something, yeah, it's a bit of struggle, but I feel like we can overcome those kind of barrier by attending events like tonight, attending the Black Professional in Tech conference where we met virtually, and by trying to empower each other and reach out to people outside our local area, basically, to gather advice and guidance for those things. And I think this is something that I didn't catch at the beginning of my career. I thought that the the more I would have studied and achieved technical skills and things like that, the better it will be for me on my professional career. Because it's quite the case in Africa, to be fair. People don't invest that much in soft skills. Anyway, from what I heard regarding my own country, to be precise. So yeah.
That's very good. That's very interesting. You touch on a lot of points there. The intersectionality of you being a Black woman. So you're facing both. Um, you're facing microaggressions on all levels, on all angles, and sometimes it's I can't say that I will ever understand the intersection, but I certainly understand the being Black, that I can definitely speak to. But we see the outcomes though, so we can almost always see what happens to Black women when they have to face the gender gaps that we have, and they also have to face the racial inequities that we face, and it can be sometimes hard for you to really dissect what you're actually currently facing at any specific moment, and which even it begs a question. You know, we should be trying to tackle systemic racism on all angles and gender inequities as much as we can. And you bring up some great points in terms of your soft skills versus your technical skills. And what I do find, and I'll tell you, like at least in my experience, and I was in management for many years. I'm talking about over 14 years. I do find that where we doubt ourselves, we end up reinvesting in ourselves in terms of education. But I think for the most part, what I see, Blacks are largely educated. But while we're over educating ourselves, we got to consider that we're also missing out on some opportunities. And in this case, you decided to um, reinvest in your education in this case, while someone else was not investing and still moving ahead. So we got to consider some of the opportunities that we're missing out on, because now in your case, you're unsure what you're actually currently facing. Is it the gender gap? Is it the racial gap? And when you go into a firm and you cannot see yourself represented, whether that be a Black leader, male or female, then you can't really aspire to it to begin with. And that's the reason why we say that representation is really important. But I would agree that it's not, you're not missing out on so many opportunities to reinvest in yourself, but we must consider to what extent do you invest yourself and see some return. Do you see what I'm saying? Because if, at least in my case and in my experience, I had a lot of my white colleagues who were not as educated, and all they put in was maybe about 20%. But we have to make up for that difference where we put in about over 200%, and we still can't get ahead. And you will actually, in fact, find that at most corporations, a lot of Blacks are largely educated, and you still see the gap, which is very, very disturbing sometimes.
The thing is, for me, the gaps is mainly due to the fact that we don't invest enough in the soft skills / leadership / politics. And I feel like if we put more effort on networking, sponsorship, mentorship, we will manage to reduce significantly the gap. But maybe it's an utopia, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I might be too idealistic, but for now, that's what I think and what helped me to stay positive.
Yeah.
I can jump in. I was actually going to mention networking as something that that everyone that should be doing, Black, white, male, female, whatever the case may be. Networking, not just with your affinity group or your minority group, but just in general, because it's so important. I think, the idea that somebody in a room you're not in can mention you. Well, why would that happen? Because maybe it's specifically you're looking at soft skills, but maybe you went to an event and you met a new person there. Maybe you're volunteering in some way and you're getting your name out there. You're developing and pushing up this personal brand that shows that you're a person that, people can reach out to for this particular skill that you have. And I think that's really important. And right back to what you're saying, mentorship, sponsorship, how do you get those things? They don't have to look like you. They just have to have the ability to kind of pull you into those conversations and, recommend you and all of that type of stuff. So I think getting to a place where, as we are right now, we can start doing that for others. We can do it, across the aisle to our peers or reaching down to people coming up after us. I think that's all really important.
It's very good. Thanks for sharing. I couldn't agree more. Certainly, spending a lot more time with your peers or people that, or rather, trying to find out networks of where you want to go. Think about your goal and where you want to go, and find networks within those spaces and interact with them as much as you can. We're afraid to create a certain narrative. There's always a stereotype, and people always questioning why they together, right? But I've never really quite understood why when Black colleagues get together, it seems like you're excluding people, but when white colleagues get together, it never seems like they're excluding people. So we have to start understanding those dynamics and understanding why it's important to also invest in us, and getting some time to share that space within us, because it makes all the difference when someone can understand your message, when you can speak to someone and they can understand your lived experience, as opposed to me trying to explain my every single move to a white colleague that may not necessarily be receiving the message like I want them to be. So those comfort zone and those spaces make all the difference, and do help you in your ability to build confidence and then some of those soft skills that you're talking about. You can start with your own circles and just leverage any other of your white colleagues, or people who just don't look like you, right? Let me jump on to the second question. So, what do you think are the top three barriers facing Black professionals in tech? And maybe I can take this back to Shien Buddy.
So I actually was going to talk about networking in this space. You're talking about finding groups of people who aren't like you, or trying to bridge those gaps where people might not feel comfortable because they're just not exposed. Whereas on the other hand, the average minority person, whatever the minority is, whether it's related to a disability or your skin color, religion, you are kind of inundated and living in a world where the majority is always at the forefront. So you kind of have been trained how to interact, how to deal with everybody on TV that you listen to, it all kind of is that. And so coming from the other angle, it might not be something, unless someone is living in a place where maybe they're the minority for a change, someone that's generally in the majority or something of that nature, it might be hard for them to kind of relate. And so, I was just going to mention that networking, where whatever the affinity group is, you don't have to just network in one way. You can, is there a group for people who like kangaroos? You love kangaroos, go to that group. You're going to meet all sorts of people, and having a common ground definitely helps with that conversation, with that bridging of the gap, and then that can help you meet people. I saw something posted on Instagram today about, how underrated networking is. You can meet a random person on a bus, and before now, back when people were all going equally, and it wasn't as aren't as tied to our houses a little bit. But in the before times, you could meet a stranger on a bus who ends up being the CEO of a company you'd love to work at. I've seen those types of stories. They happen. And it's all because we are social human beings. We like to interact, but we love having a common ground. And I think a lot of times people don't see a common ground as readily. And so it's a little bit of putting yourself out there. The top barrier, I would say, is just systemic racism all around. And the fact that there are silos or bubbles of people that kind of keep to themselves and aren't as welcoming to outsiders, whatever that is. Someone that looks at me and doesn't think that I love kangaroos might be a little standoffish if I show up at the kangaroo club. But when you do that, when you put yourself out there a little bit and kind of get into those associations, you create scenarios where you're interacting with people that you can help, that can help you, and that I think at the end of the day that can really bring some benefits in the long run to get your name in those rooms where you aren't in.
Absolutely. So just go back to that point. So this is some great points in terms of networking, but I'm curious to know, is there one thing, or rather, is there any, besides just general systemic racism, do you think people think of Blacks when you consider technology? Are Blacks considered the top? And sorry,
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to say, I mean, this depends on where you are in the world, and geographically, this may be very different. I mean, for the most part, in North America, when you think about technology, you're going to start thinking either East Asian or South Asian. And so, do you think those come across as, do they hurt us? Is that something that you guys have probably ever faced?
Personally, I've been in North America for 4 years, almost 4 years now. And Black people are still a visible minority in tech. So for me, it's quite normal if people don't see a Black professional when they think about tech at the beginning. But I don't see this as a barrier, maybe because I haven't been living here for that long. What I see as a barrier, and that actually is a good thing to mention here, is the opportunities. And I address the opportunities on different levels. The first level is that Black people, I feel like Black people have opportunities in tech, especially cybersecurity, because there's really a lack of professional in this field. So I think anyone with a degree or experience in cybersecurity will manage to get hired somewhere with a decent salary as well. But the issue gonna be when you join the firm, what kind of opportunities you're gonna get. From what I notice, especially for immigrants, Black immigrants, when they arrive in Canada, it's such a change for them with the culture, the country, the weather, whatever. There is a huge time they need to adjust themselves. The way they work, they used to work, need to change. The way they network with people, the way they actually deliver also a value in the firm. So all those changes, I feel like, doesn't help them to be noticed in the firm. It's like the people in the recruitment process trust them in their ability to deliver the job. So they got the offer, they accept the offer and got hired. But when they start working for the firm, the dominant group, so the white people, the other colleagues, teams members, the senior management won't see them as assets to put on their projects, because they see those Black immigrants as professionals who are still struggling and who lack of confidence and are too shy, or like they don't know how to adjust with themselves. So it's on both ways from my perspectives. And if we have a strong sponsorship for those kind of people, it would have helped the community a lot. Sometimes I feel like Black people who actually were born here in the country could help the other Black brothers kind of to overcome those barriers in the firm. But even that is not always that easy, because in general, when I don't want to do a generality, but there's still a gap. We still keep our distance. I also even noticed during the 4 years that I've been in Canada that sometimes we are all Black, we are trying to fight for less discrimination and more opportunities in the same firm. But when the time gonna come to be united and the white folks gonna say that, okay, we're gonna sit and listen to you. So it's actually the great time to speak about it. Instead of leverage the opportunity, we cannot fight each other and miss the opportunity. So it's a huge thing. I don't know if I don't know how to bring awareness around those subjects inside the community and make sure that next time the Black folks see another one struggling, he come to rescue him as much as he can. This is an open question.
No, that's you're bringing up some really good points. So you're talking about a cross section of different intersectionalities, especially within the Black experience. So besides you facing a barrier where you're never really too sure if it's whether it's you being a woman or being Black. On top of that, you have to face another barrier where it's you're brand new in the country. So you have a situation where even a Black colleague may not necessarily relate to your experience with that movement, right? And there's a gap there where someone may not necessarily be relating to your current struggles and experience within that movement, that just moving into the country. And I can certainly understand that. And same thing with, I think you mentioned that once you get hired by a firm, there's a question of are senior managers or the owners of the firm hiring you for um, possibly your personal, or rather, are they really invested in your personal self-development, or are they really hiring you just for your pure tech skills? And that's exactly where we want them, right? So these are some really good points, and it almost happens on a daily basis where you see a company will just hire someone as a tech and figure, okay, I have my tech, and they're not necessarily interested in hiring into senior leadership roles because you're not one of the first people considered for it, because the the background, or rather the default, is always the white male, right? Or if we're going to be improving some type of diversity, it'll be a white woman, right? So those roles are not necessarily considered, rather given to us necessarily first, or rather we're never really considered first. But then again, to your point, I think it is necessary that we start investing time to understand our holistic experience, whether you're new to the country, whether you are facing a certain barrier with soft skills, just that cross section of opportunities. I won't call them. I'm not going to call them challenges. If we were to start listening to one another, we can come up with better ways so we can become vocal about how we want to progress. I just don't want to be hired for my pure tech skills. I also have some leadership skills that I can provide, and I want to advance. So I think those are some of the things that people, or rather companies that are progressive to begin with. If you're a progressive company, you're not just going to be investing in any person, whether it's white or Black, just for their pure tech skills. You want to make sure that they can progress, because as they progress, your earnings go up. It's by default. Your earnings going to be going up. The more you invest in your people, the better the outlook becomes. I think, Shamba, do you want to say something?
No, I didn't have anything to add there. I think that, if if you're looking at it, just agreeing with what you're saying, if you're looking at how you're going to bring people in, you want, well-rounded people, you want well-rounded teams. And if the people in those teams feel like they're being challenged and they're given learning opportunities, they're given mentorship, sponsorship, and those types of things, I think it only helps. And I think a great manager perhaps would recognize that you might not be an employee on my team forever, but I care about your growth and I want you to rise. And honestly, maybe it's a utopia, like the team was saying, but that's the ideal, right? That's the type of manager I would hope we would all be. That's the type of manager I'm sure most people would want, someone that really wants them to grow and get better so that they can succeed. Because at the end of the day, your job at the moment is just that. Your career holistically is kind of the bigger picture.
And let's also not forget that systemic racism is fairly complex, has complex nuances, and where we may just see that a certain group of Black people are now working together, it's actually that there's a successful outcome of systemic racism. It's so complex to a point um, where it's not designed for us to flourish. It's designed to keep us apart. And so where you're simply left with no choice but to scramble, scrambling meaning that you're not going to invest your time with your other Black colleagues. So the system is actually working. The way it was designed to work it was designed to keep us apart. So we must recognize those nuances, or that complexity of the system where systemic racism at play, where we're not so invested in anyone that looks like us, but we're all trying to move ahead, and we're only focused on us as opposed to us as a community. So that is actually systemic racism just playing itself, and that's what it was designed to keep us apart as much as we can. But I mean, people are awakened now, and people recognize the strength of community, and people understand that if we were to advance our interests, we got to work together. So I think it's really important, to your first point, that we hone in on these networks or any opportunities where you can strike a conversation with someone. To your point again, if it's because you may just like kangaroos and you want to meet up over coffee chat, talk about kangaroos, or you may just like Starbucks, I don't know, whatever it is, right? And it's just a matter of trying to find that, strike a balance, and make sure they can talk to someone in a way that they can reflect and understand your experience, and there's a perhaps something that you guys may agree on, and it gives you an opportunity to learn something about someone else. Let me quickly jump to the fourth question. What are your thoughts on the roles that early education and tech giants play in confronting systemic barriers facing Black techs? And consider the opportunity that STEM and just early education, which is not necessarily geared to um, the understanding of the Black experience, because especially in this world, I would say this is both Canada, US, or Europe. Um, the Black experience is largely left out, and so there's very little understanding of the Black experience by default. What do you think early education does in confronting systemic racism? How do you think, what part does it play? And maybe I'll take this back to Shian Buddy.
I think it can play a really large part when we're thinking about, even thinking about the way that teachers interact with their students. At times there can be biases there. We really have to be frank with the fact that unfortunately these things happen. And, that's not to say that someone might not come through all of that and still be successful, but it does happen. There are certain children at times that get, they're put in timeout more often than other children. What's at the root of that? But in terms of STEM and instilling that, I think there's so much potential and opportunity there. Being able to come into a young person's life early on and let them kind of be instilled with that confidence. Earlier this year, I worked with STEM Atlanta Women, They had a virtual camp where they were teaching girls 13 through 17, 18, and they were going through all different aspects of STEM. They had different people come in and do presentations. I did one on automation, you know, all sorts of things. And it was really great to see them thrive in that environment. And, you know, wasn't because they're better or worse than anyone else. They just had an opportunity at that time to have a group of adults pouring into them. You know, we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, right? You have people that are coming and saying, hey, these are the things I want to tell you. I look like you and I did this. This is the step that I took. And these are the decisions that I made that led me to where I am. You know, in some cases, this is the type of money I can make in this role, like you're saying, Fatima, about cybersecurity, and letting the students be aware of these things early on can kind of expand their horizons. You think about statistics about girls of certain ages in certain places losing interest in science as they grow older, being interested when they're 6, 7, 8, and being less interested by middle school. What's happening there? And I don't know about numbers for, you know, Black versus any other race, but I would imagine that having people instilling something in you and providing it as an option makes it seem more real and can open that up as an avenue for you to take. And I'd say the same thing for tech giants. You know, for every internal organization that volunteers somewhere to do something, there's a boss that gave, you know, approval, that said, yes, you can take this time out, you can use this money to do this game. So, you know, on the other hand of that, I have Black professionals in intelligent automation, a group I co-founded at my company. But if we didn't have support from our organization, you know, we'd have to do a lot more of it on our own, and it would appear differently. And so imagine the difference between someone that's in, you know, any tech giant that has an interest about reaching out to an underserved community, but then their company doesn't want to help, then it's a little bit harder versus a scenario where they're given, you know, carte blanche to do that, and then they're able to reach even more people. So I think to pair them together can be really amazing.
Very good. I certainly believe in that, especially when it comes to tech giants, especially investing in Black communities. And I think I'd mentioned this in a previous episode where, you know, um, for the most part, we do see a ton of companies now uh, trying to make donations. And I think sometimes that can be the wrong approach. I believe companies should perhaps start considering investing in a community where, um, back someone up. Because I don't think the Black community is looking for donations. That's never going to help. I would say sponsor people. Be that person's platform. If you see something really good, let's say for example, a tech giant discovers that someone within the Black community comes up with something really neat, something really neat that they can sponsor, then be the backbone, sponsor the product, sponsor the person, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to give you a donation. Because what really helps with these kind of technologies is obviously the infrastructure in place, or rather the supply chain that makes that product come to market. And so companies are very well invested in that. So a donation can mean one thing versus sponsorship. Like if you really want to advance people's tech innovations, just sponsor them as opposed to handing out charities. I think we got to go past that. Fatim, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. So what do you think early education and tech giants have to play here in combating systemic racism?
I think that they really help a lot, and bringing higher education to the Black youth really help with representation and teach them that it's actually possible, and if they work hard and network, they will make it happen, basically. And to be back on the tech giants, this conversation reminds me a campaign called Pass the Mic. I think this happened when there was a lot of anti-racism, black racism issue in the USA, and a lot of initiatives happen. And this one, I noticed it on LinkedIn, where not companies, but other experts in companies decide to leverage their platforms, their audience, and basically pass the mic to another Black professional or Black experts. And when this happened, it really amazed me. I felt like it was really a great thing that those people actually did for the community. Because sometimes we are all waiting for companies, but even at each level, each individual can do something, you see. And those people's, the fact that they offer their platform to those Black folks really help a lot the community and help with the representation. Representation is such an important thing and can really impact so much the community that I don't even have the word to explain how much is important. But yeah, this makes me think about it, the Pass the Mic campaign.
Yeah, I think that's so awesome. I remember hearing about that, and imagine the kind of numbers that they were talking about there, where it was someone that had, maybe I have 10,000 followers, but you have 1 million followers, and you're letting me kind of take over stream on Instagram, or I'm taking over all of the things you're posting. That's such an amazing thing that they did, I think. I'd be curious to see the kind of numbers that came out of it, but just the fact that they were saying, I'm going to pause what I'm doing and literally let you take over this higher, view count platform. I think that's a really good point about how every person can have a difference at a certain level. You don't have to wait for the big company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can all be allies to one extent, whether it's someone who's got 1 million followers versus your 10,000 followers. I think that could be a great way of making sure we can amplify the voices. So just the last question here. So what role do you think tech plays? Because I know you got to log off soon. What role do you think tech plays in addressing systemic racism? I know we're almost out of time. And I'll just give you one little experience that I remember. And I think tech does play a huge role, especially when it comes to combating systemic racism, because everything becomes digital. And so consider, you're going to a store and you're trying to purchase an item. And I do remember I was shopping around for a car, and it was me and my wife, and we went into this lot, and we're trying to look out for the Grand Cherokees. And I remember every single sales guy was busy trying to sell the cars out there, and there were tons of models available to be viewed. And I remember the owner bumping into us and didn't pay us any mind, and said, I'm going to my car. Do you want to perhaps see my car? And I could see all the new cars in the lot, and this guy decided to show us his own personal vehicle, and there were all these models and other cars available to be shown. So clearly he didn't really want our business. He was not really interested, or rather he probably thought that we were window shopping. I don't know, very good chance. But I think it was very interesting how that transpired, because I think technology has a great way of changing that transaction now, where you can just go online and purchase a car, right? So quickly, maybe Shinbadi, before you head out, just what role do you think technology plays in combating systemic racism?
That's a really interesting story that you shared there. It's interesting because I was thinking in another direction when I saw the question. So I was thinking more about the fact that in the data and AI space, there's been a lot of conversation of late about bias. And I think there's a huge opportunity for those that are interested in tech or who are currently in tech to kind of learn from and work with leaders in humanities and other disciplines so that they can understand how to really work on the, the aspects that they're building and the type of bias that exists, and trying to ensure that the bias of a single individual or majority group isn't embedded within those types of algorithms or applications implicitly or otherwise. Because learning is not just kind of the basic way you might think of it. It's even disparate data points being able to be used in conjunction to still have bias. So that's what first comes to mind. But, as you're saying, yeah, in a digital world, even a dog could be on the internet, right? that's the old joke. So you would think that not having a physical form or a face to a name should be able to make it a little bit easier. But I guess only time will tell. I would hope for more of a scenario where we're working to remove those types of biases from the things that we're creating, if we can, and trying to stand against that.
Absolutely. I think there's a huge barrier when it comes to personal interactions, especially between Blacks and others, and it doesn't have to be whites. It could be other communities who may just be rife with racism, where I think we lose out on a ton of opportunities because someone considers, okay, the way we look, or rather just having that awkwardness when you walk into a store and no one really is paying attention to, or rather no one really thinks you're there to purchase anything, right? Or rather that awkwardness where you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, I don't want to have any interaction with this purchase because of my experience in the past where, people don't necessarily care about my dollars and, are not really so keen to get my business. So I think tech definitely changes that scope, where we have a chance to digitize all transactions, and especially as we move towards the future, where you're not going to necessarily have to know my name when I'm purchasing your item. We're already in that phase right now, especially with blockchain coming up and the power that tech provides. And same thing with think about even Amazon today. You could be buying an item and the person selling the item does not necessarily know the customer, right? So I think tech definitely does have a huge role to play when it comes to at least reducing that wealth gap when it comes to opportunities created for Blacks. Fatim, your points, so we can wrap this up.
Oh, nothing to add. I couldn't agree more with what you guys said.
Very good. Well, I'm not gonna extend this one. All the other episodes have been pretty long, and I'm glad that we were able to cover most of the questions, actually, if not all. And I'm glad that you guys were able to take a good chunk of your time to join us tonight. Um, I'll let you guys put in your closing thoughts, and then I'll close it off. For team, you want to go first?
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, and it's really appreciated. And I hope that I share some good tips for you guys for the future. And feel free to reach out if there is anything.
Absolutely. And I'll be sharing your details as soon as we're done with the call. Shamba, do you want to put your closing thoughts?
Sure. Again, thank you for having us. I think the last thing I'd like to say is that, community is so important. It can provide someone with advice, support, opportunities that they need, and they might not be able to find for themselves. And it could be all sorts of communities, whether it's the tech community, kangaroo club, whatever it is, anything that, strikes passion in you, there's probably someone else that has that as well. And that would be my advice to anyone that is interested about getting into tech and nervous about kind of being the only person or being othered. Try to find affinity groups that you can have some community with. It might not be in the organization you're in, but having that sort of community will help give you the confidence to move forward.
Couldn't agree more.
I have something that I would like to share. A note just to keep in mind to everybody who's gonna listen this video. I just want to say that we should stay hungry and push and look for our dreams and make them happen, basically.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I think everyone's busy trying to make a living, and in one way or the other, there'll always be an opportunity for someone. So if you're not if you're not addressing systemic racism within your world, I can almost guarantee you there are a million others doing it. So we should never feel like we're falling short there, because there are a ton of consultants out there who are addressing who are rather offering DEI strategies and so forth. But for the most part, to your point again, community, networking, whether it's kangaroos or coffee, whatever the case is, you go for it. Again, thanks for joining us for 6th episode of this series, where we provide a safe space for Black professionals. I'm glad to see two beautiful young ladies in the tech world. I can guarantee you, the first time I remember back in university, I declared that I was going to do IT, and I quickly changed my mind after the first semester. And I jumped into business. I took business after that. So I remember my first fall semester I joined IT, but I changed my mind. I remember my class was just purely. I was the only Black guy in that class, and it was all Asian. But there are a ton of people, Black professionals in tech, as you saw last week on Be Future. And I encourage you guys to network and use those opportunities as your platform. It was nice having you guys on the show. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep the smiles on, and hopefully we'll meet up maybe sometime later on in the year. And once Corona is over, you never know. I may just be in your city. You never know. And doing what I do best. So thanks again. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
So
you.
much.
Bye.
Bye now.